Story 1. Heart attacks at 36. I wasn't obese, but I was diagnosed with diabetes at 10, and it definitely took its toll on me. I'm in heart failure now and just turned 40 a few days ago. I realized that I almost died and haven't truly lived yet because I fear everything. That was an emotional revelation. It's time to face some fears and live a little. Story 2. I had an amazing rooftop dinner and fun with friends until I saw how I looked in pictures. I was devastated by how bad I looked and couldn't get it out of my head. I was fine for 8 years looking like that, but then for whatever reason, I realized I could do so much better. A year later, I am 40 pounds lighter and now in a workout program for building muscle and endurance. Story 3. I was getting ready to go to work and struggling to button a large shirt, realizing I might have to buy an extra large size. This made me browse some photos of myself during my commute, and I barely recognized myself. When I got to work, I decided to take the stairs up 2 flights and felt like I was going to collapse at the top. I nearly sweated through my shirt, and it took me 20 minutes at my desk to catch my breath. That night, I went home, sat on my couch, and asked myself who I was anymore. The next day, I started my journey from 340 to 210. Story 4. This may sound silly, but I was watching the Barbie movie with my best friend when I realized that the relationship I was in wasn't serving me and that I should get therapy. It has been almost 2 years since I ended that relationship. I have done shadow work and lowered my A1C from 15 to 8. I lost 40 pounds, and I am still working through a lot of trauma I never addressed along with grief and pain. It has been very challenging, but I feel like I am finally taking control of my life. Story 5. The day I was so stressed speaking with my boss on the phone that my teeth started to chatter. It sounded like I was trying to speak while freezing. I quit a few days later and never tried to take on stressful jobs again, even for money. Story 6. I was feeling suicidal and had grabbed a knife to hurt myself when my brother saw me. My mom later told me that he expressed his hope that I didn't see him because he thought I was going to hurt or kill him. Story 7. When bending over to tie my shoes became difficult because of the size of my stomach, I decided to take action. I now go to the gym 5 days a week, and I have lost 18 kilograms. Story 8. I had been homeless for 6 years. Nobody would talk to me. All my friends withdrew, and I had limited contact with my family. I was alone on the streets and scared. Most of my friends on the streets were struggling with addiction too. Though I think they were good people, they too were addicted. I became a liar, a manipulator, and a horrible person. I was over 80 pounds overweight and my health was failing. I was hungry and helpless, with constant feelings of suicide. One day, I decided to go to rehabilitation. I knew that wasn't enough, so I got into transitional living. I had heart surgery that I badly needed. I made friends, established connections, and attended Alcoholics Anonymous. I lost 80 pounds. This isn't a complete fairy tale. After 16 months sober, I recently went on a 10-day binge and lost my job. I almost ended up homeless again. But things are looking up. I am 31 days sober, have a job interview tomorrow, and have saved my apartment. If anyone is reading this and struggling with addiction, no matter what, never give up on yourself. I won't. You matter and are loved. Story 9. I had someone tell me I was a miserable person. It really hurt at first, but at the time it was true. I was struggling with abandonment issues because my dad and I had stopped speaking. I went through other traumatic events and was not in a good mental space. I was very angry at the world. I was depressed, struggling with anxiety, and I hated where I was in life. I kept letting my depression interfere with achieving my goals. I am not surprised that I was an awful person to be around. However, that person's comment made me reflect on my situation. It initiated a series of events that led me to therapy, returning to college, changing jobs, and really working on myself. Now I am much happier. Story 10. I was 54 in 2019 and finally realized my life was my own. If I didn't make a change, my life would not improve. So, I confided in a friend and her husband, and they said, "We got you." I waited 6 months to tell my husband of 24 years that I was leaving. Our kids were grown. He said, "Okay, Whatever. I have been content ever since. We divorced in January 2021. Story 11. It took getting food poisoning and being laid up on the couch in misery for me to realize I was more at peace when I wasn't talking to my ex. I understood how bad and mentally abusive the relationship was for me. I wish it had happened sooner so I wouldn't have wasted almost 4 years thinking things would get better. Story 12. I was using alcohol excessively. A friend encouraged me to drink during the day one day. We dropped our kids off at kindergarten at 9 a.m., went home and started drinking. Fortunately, I had a friend living with me because by lunchtime I was intoxicated. My bad friend just left me, but the friend living with me sent me to bed and picked up my kids from kindergarten. If my friend hadn't been living with me, I would have passed out, missed the pickup, and possibly lost the kids. I didn't stop drinking immediately, but it was definitely a wake-up call. I only drink socially now and never to the point of passing out. Story 13. I grew tired of being treated poorly by the women I dated or was in a relationship with. I realized it was due to my appearance. Since then, I have gotten into shape, improved my skin, and started to dress better. Story 14. Spontaneous pneumothorax. I was severely underweight, neglecting my body, and smoked for 10 years. I underwent approximately 10 chest drains and 3 lung surgeries over the course of 3 years, frequently in and out of the hospital whenever my lungs failed. Now, I have gained 20 kilograms, exercise every day, and have not smoked in 2 years. The entire experience has been challenging, but it has ultimately been a blessing in disguise. Story 15. Learning that my mom was recently diagnosed with diabetes and never told anyone was a shock. I was already on the path to eating healthier for various reasons, but when I learned from my dad that my mom's diagnosis was due to a lifetime of unhealthy eating, including highly processed and sugary foods, it scared me. I realized I have a very real chance of being diagnosed as well, and I want to do my best to prevent this from becoming my reality. This has led me to pay closer attention to my eating habits, cook for myself much more than I used to, choose balanced meals, and restrain myself from buying and eating as much junk food as I did growing up, which can be challenging. Overall, I believe it was a necessary wake-up call, and I hope that in the long term my body will benefit from it. Story 16. My ex-wife cheated on me with one of my best friends. I wasn't the perfect husband, but I let myself go a bit physically and became complacent. Emotionally, I wasn't as available as I could have been and took many things for granted, but that didn't justify her actions. I've lost over 25 pounds and have maintained my weight since everything happened over a year ago. I've never felt more confident about my appearance in my life. I also strive to be more emotionally in tune and available with my girlfriend, and she has been incredibly supportive as I learn to trust again and feel more secure. While I don't wish what I experienced on anyone, I will never allow myself to become complacent again. Story 17. I looked at myself in one of the angled mirrors in a fitting room area of a store and saw how my stomach appeared. I am a relatively small person, and I do not look particularly heavy, but it is concerning for me since I have never been this weight or this round in my life. Soon, I plan to start a journey with the goal of losing 30 to 40 pounds. I am 28 years old, 5 feet 3 inches tall, and weigh 160 pounds. Story 18. I was tired of feeling uncomfortable in my body. I had reached a low point in my life, making it difficult to get healthy both physically and emotionally. I realized that I am in control of my life and can shape it as I desire. This understanding motivated me to improve myself, and I am determined to keep moving forward without looking back. Story 19. I was fired from my first real job for not progressing enough during my first year. This made me realize that I cannot simply coast after earning my degree. I must put effort into my life. Story 20. My change in life began when the state served a search warrant on my home and seized computers and cell phones. I was fired from my high-stress job that same day. A month later, federal agencies served another warrant on my home and business, seizing all cash on hand and freezing bank accounts, assets, and any property sales. That same day, I had an argument with my wife, who told me she was no longer attracted to me and was in love with one of my coworkers, and she wanted a divorce. That same week, I was contacted by church leadership and advised that they would begin an inquiry that would likely end in excommunication. Friends and even family members suddenly wanted nothing to do with me. Initially, I was angry. That quickly changed to feelings of desperation and depression. I was devastated. Hard decisions were needed and made. Fast forward 1 year. I was living in a developing country with no income. I learned to survive, live, and eat without income. I learned a new language, married a much younger native, and started a small business. I lost 40 pounds, changed my hairstyle and color, and grew a well-trimmed beard. I got rid of my glasses, worked out, built a lot of muscle, and stopped taking all prescription drugs while managing my blood pressure and cholesterol. Fast forward nearly 17 years. I now have a life of very low stress. I built a small business chain with my wife. Our life and income are very stable. We raised 3 stepchildren and put them all through college. I am very happily married and have traveled much of the world, but I have never returned to my country of origin. I look and feel 15 years younger than I am and am happier and healthier than I have any right to be. Story 21. I am in my 3rd year as a special education teacher. That year, I had a challenging class and 2 sets of parents who hired advocates. I wasn't doing anything wrong, but I could have performed better, and I wasn't receiving good guidance from my superiors. One of the advocates escalated the situation to our school board and superintendent. I realized my situation was serious when I started being treated like a social outcast. My principal was advised to terminate my employment, but unexpectedly, they supported me and refused to act on that advice. I faced consequences for my inaction. I received 3 days of unpaid leave that I could take whenever I wanted and a letter from the superintendent that was placed in my file, never to be discussed again. That experience humbled me and highlighted that, despite all the issues I faced that year, no one was coming to save me or offer a magical solution. I was on my own. It was difficult, and I had to engage in serious self-reflection and personal growth. I spent the summer attending every training I could find, educating myself, and learning from my mistakes. When I returned the following year, my class was still challenging, but I persevered, and things improved. I transformed from being viewed as inept and uncertain in my classroom to becoming the person the district advised other struggling teachers to contact for help and guidance. Supervisors often expressed their regret for what I endured, how they felt they failed me, and how proud they were of me for taking control of my situation and turning it around. While my journey has been bittersweet, it's gratifying to be recognized as a leader and an expert in the classroom. I leveraged that experience and growth into better opportunities. I frequently share my experience as a way to own it without shame and to encourage others not to wait for someone else to provide direction. Sometimes you simply need to buckle down and figure things out for yourself. Story 22. I lost everything and, in doing so, gained myself. The wake-up call was the realization that I had been hurting people for nearly 4 decades. The shame of being that person was the catalyst for my 18 months of recovery from narcissistic personality disorder. Story 23. Moving out made me realize I need to work. If I have to work with others, I need to manage my social anxiety better. Story 24. My mom passed away at the age of 61. She did not take care of herself, and I remember telling my sister that if only she had eaten better when we advised her to. My sister looked at me and replied, "If only she had started when she was 30. I was 30 at the time and weighed over 350 pounds. That was a huge wake-up call. I have since lost 150 pounds and continue to make progress. Story 25. Waking up from a week-long coma to my mom crying and a room full of doctors and nurses clapping. I overdosed on Suboxone and Valium in rehab of all places. I was flown out and put on life support because I had aspirated while unconscious, and it took 14 hours for the staff to find me. By then, they said I was swollen and foaming at the mouth. I have been struggling with drug addiction for 6 years. Currently, I am only smoking marijuana and cigarettes now and becoming very involved in therapy to see the positive side of life. Story 26. I was obese for most of my life, growing up in a family where we ate poorly and didn't take care of ourselves. My mother died at 52 due to poor lifestyle choices, which was a significant warning sign. When I was 24, I was a licensed practical nurse working full-time at night while attending registered nurse school full-time. My husband had just returned home from a year-long deployment when he was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. In that same month, I experienced a missed miscarriage and needed a dilation and curettage procedure because the baby would not leave my body. The heartbeat stopped at 7 weeks, but I discovered this during an ultrasound at 10 weeks. I had no symptoms or bleeding. That pregnancy was unplanned, but I became attached to the idea. We weren't using protection, taking a casual approach to starting a family. However, after the miscarriage, I became somewhat obsessed. A couple of months later, I experienced another missed miscarriage that required another dilation and curettage procedure. At this point, I was struggling just to survive, managing both my job and school full-time. I barely slept, and my husband was unable to work due to his condition, which I was largely trying to ignore because of my overwhelming feelings. Shortly after the second miscarriage, I participated in a nursing education program for children, focusing on health and hygiene. We spent all day with the kids and went to play in the gym during recess. I was incredibly out of shape, and I was so sore afterward that my legs shook every time I tried to sit on the toilet. I cried frequently and blamed myself for the miscarriages. I decided to start a couch to 5K program soon after. I struggled to run for longer than a minute at a time and cried almost daily to my husband. I had to push myself constantly to get through the program. My sole goal was to run a full 5K without walking, regardless of the pace. I completed it in about 6 to 7 weeks. The 5K took place during the last month of my registered nurse program, making it a significant achievement for me. I completed the entire 5K without stopping and went on to lose 90 pounds. A little over a year after my first 5K, I ran a full marathon, completing 26.2 miles in 5 hours and 24 minutes. Though it wasn't the best time, I was incredibly proud of my accomplishment. I don't run as frequently now but participate in a couple of 5 Burmese shots each year, typically finishing the whole race in about 30 minutes without needing to train extensively. I've maintained my weight loss since pregnancy, and I now have a healthy and active 4-year-old daughter. I also underwent a breast reduction and tummy tuck, eliminating a lot of loose skin, although I still have some that I dislike. I regret my past choices and the consequences they brought, but I am committed to teaching my daughter how to lead a healthy lifestyle so she won't have to experience what I did. Fortunately, she enjoys fruits and vegetables and loves to run. She was disappointed that she couldn't race with me at my last 5K because there wasn't a kids run available. She has participated in 3 one-mile kids runs and is proud of her medal collection. She often wears them, declaring, "I'm so strong and fast." The moral of the story is not to wait to make a change. If you're unhappy, you can take action. It must be important to you and you'll find the time. Story 27. I became too comfortable at a long-term job. It was a good position with nice people. Eventually, a change in the industry led to us parting ways. We are still friends, but I found an amazing job that has reignited my creativity and passion for life. The job search was not easy, though. Story 28. I was helping a friend get sober and clean, but he ended up overdosing on the anniversary of my dad's passing. I realized it's not worth it anymore. I have been off drugs since the Super Bowl. Story 29. I was drinking alcohol instead of facing the trauma and pain. I would often black out drunk and not remember how I hurt my leg or ordered pizza. It was fine at first because I was usually at home alone or with a friend. One time, I got blackout drunk and did not even recognize that I was being taken advantage of by my sister's boyfriend. My sister saw what he was trying to do and stopped him. My friend was there as well. Long story short, they broke up because of his actions. I was hurt and blamed myself for months, thinking that I was the one who did something wrong. My sister and friend insisted that they knew me too well to think that I allowed what he was doing on purpose. I was depressed for weeks and have not touched alcohol since. I am still disgusted with myself. Story 30. The first slight push was my doctor saying I was heading towards prediabetes. The actual turning point was quite unfortunate. I had just finished a romance novel and was hit with such an intense wave of loneliness that it sent me into a depressive spiral for 4 days. It was a cycle of negative thoughts that made it impossible to think, accompanied by a suffocating dread at the mere thought of talking to friends, even just through text, and nightmares at night. When I finally emerged from that, I realized it was not a pleasant experience and I wanted to avoid it happening again. Thus began my weight loss journey for health and to hopefully become attractive enough for someone to consider dating. Story 31. Tonight I'm reminded that the guy I like will probably never like me back, eventually leave me, or find a girl he genuinely likes. My wake-up call? Thinking about how difficult it will be when I lose him. But I'm tired of this. I'm tired of hiding how I feel. I'm tired of not being texted and of not feeling that he cares about me. I'm tired of being so attached, needing his attention and friendship. He's really busy right now, so he won't notice if I leave. It will be painful to leave, but I need to move on because he's going to pilot school and will likely forget about me or find someone else. There's no point in trying. He puts no effort into our relationship, and while that's just how he grew up and he offered to change, I like him too much to ask him to change just for me. He's still perfect just the way he is. We just don't work well together unless we're in contact or together. I might be being impulsive, but so many people tell me to leave anyway, mainly because he doesn't text back or seem to care. He does care, he's just not good with this. I don't know if this is even a wake-up call. It might just be giving up on this because it's unlikely to last, and I need to move on. I might have a friend delete everything so I can't contact him, and then I'll just have to accept it. I really hurt right now thinking this is going to end, but I feel like I have no other option at this point. Story 32. Realizing that many of the things I was obsessed with, like money and being a stereotypical alpha male, do not matter very much at all. Story 33. My child told me he hated me. I realized I was becoming too much like my father. I've been trying to correct that unpleasant side of myself ever since, and my child and I get along very well now, I am happy to say. Story 34. I have spent half my life deeply loving someone who does not need or seemingly want me anymore. We spent 7 years apart and reconnected 3 years ago. During those 7 years, I felt haunted by his absence. The thought of walking away feels like choosing death. Lingering and longing for his attention makes me feel like a wilting flower. Either way, I feel like I am circling the drain. I am awake but no longer living. Story 35. All my plans revolved around meals. I struggled with my weight, making it difficult to roll over in bed or walk long distances. The wake-up call came when my wife suggested I consider weight loss surgery. It was a shock at first, but she was ultimately right. My quality of life is much better now. Story 36. Having children made me realize I needed to improve both physically and emotionally to be a better role model. Story 37. I have a history of anorexia and am currently in therapy, recovering wonderfully. The wake-up call came when I had been sick for a few days and couldn't hold down food. I already didn't eat much before getting sick. Then, I went to work a shift as a certified nursing assistant after not eating for 3 days. Every part of my body was throwing red flags and sounding alarms. Nothing felt right. I finished my shift because I had to. When I got home, I called my friend who is a registered nurse and broke down sobbing about not eating and what I should do, as I was genuinely afraid I would die from how I felt. She guided me through what to do since I lived in a small town where the hospital would have likely done nothing for me. She then asked to talk with my husband, and he spoke with her while she explained how to help. Since then, I have been doing really well. I kind of hate that I had to reach a point of fearing for my life, but I wouldn't be where I am now if I hadn't. Story 38. I was going through a really difficult time in life and seriously contemplated ending it all each day. Then I got the worst stomach virus ever, and I genuinely felt like I was dying. That experience made me realize I don't actually want to die. Story 39. I noticed my belly getting bigger, I got winded easily, and I experienced joint pain in my shoulder, elbow, and knees. I was pretty fit in my teens and early 20s, but after I got an office job, my health declined. Now in my mid-30s and having lived a sedentary life, I realize that if I don't take action now while I still have the capability, it will only get worse. making it much more challenging to make major changes as I get older. I stopped drinking sugary beverages, limited takeaways to once a month as a treat, and I do cardio and weight training 4 times a week. Story 40. I have had snoring issues for a long time, which I always assumed was just part of who I was. In the last few years, my wife commented that it seemed to be getting worse. I noticed that I felt tired a lot and had meetings at work where I couldn't focus or concentrate. We had a family holiday last year that involved some driving, and I usually do the driving on family trips. It became apparent this time that with my poor sleep, I really struggled to focus and keep my eyes awake, so I had to stop. This was very sobering, especially with my whole family in the car. When I returned, I went to a sleep clinic. Turns out I have severe sleep apnea. I now have a continuous positive airway pressure machine, which has changed my life. I feel like a different person and really recommend getting a test if you struggle with sleep. Story 41. 6 months postpartum, but I still look pregnant, as if I am in the 3rd trimester. I'm starting to hate myself. Now I'm planning to switch to a calorie deficit. Story 42. After 3 to 4 months of being on an antidepressant and changing my habits and behavior, I realize I will never be treated the same as others because of my disability, and the worst part is it's invisible. My condition, my mental state, feels like all the puzzle pieces have finally come together. I noticed that all the people I have ever gotten along with eventually got diagnosed as adults. There is no coincidence in what has happened in my life. None of this is my fault, but I can now do something to address it. Because I see the world for what it is now, I realize how mentally and physically unwell I was. Story 43. Calm is real. When I walked away from my relatives, it was the first time I ever felt calm. I had spent a year in and out of the hospital, going to the emergency room 3 times due to anxiety and extreme depression. The first time I felt calm, I described it as depression without sadness, and I tried to cry to experience that fullness, as I had lived most of my life in hypervigilance. It took a few years to not be afraid of calm. I would slip into it and then panic, waiting for the other shoe to drop. I started going to therapy and had to find the right therapist who could handle my type of trauma. I took my mental health seriously. This also benefited my body, as all the wear and tear from high stress, physical abuse, and psychosis due to deep depression, along with being hypervigilant for so long, caused constant tension, pain, and lack of sleep, which slowly began to fade. The first time I slept through the night, I woke up groggy, wondering if I had died. My husband watched over me and I slept a lot. It took a year to reduce my excessive sleep. Little by little, my body, mind, and spirit rewarded me with simple joys I had never enjoyed before. I also became less angry and fearful. I had to choose myself over everyone else, and once I had my son, I used him as an excuse to do so, but I knew this was not just for me. It was for my family's happiness, and we are happy. I hope that makes sense. Story 44. Watching my dearly beloved dad die slowly and painfully from cancer, worsened by various choices he made throughout his life, mainly related to weight, has profoundly affected me. The extent to which this made life more difficult for him and for everyone who loved him motivates me to ensure that I do not face a similar fate in 40 years. Story 45. I got dumped by the most amazing girl in the world because I couldn't express my emotions verbally. Story 46. Heartbreak made me realize and reflect on many aspects of my life that I was unhappy with. I quit drinking, smoking, junk food, binge-watching television, and being inactive. I left my previous job and began to focus intensely on fitness. I moved to another state and essentially started a new life. I am now a much different version of who I was back then. Story 47. I started to have suicidal thoughts and searched for effective ways to end my life. Instead, I convinced myself to take charge and make a change. Life has been rough, and I haven't been satisfied with myself for some time. I would isolate myself, push my friends and family away, and generally became a bitter and negative person. It's been a while since I decided to change for the better, and I'm proud of myself for my efforts. I made amends to the people I've hurt. I confessed to a girl I like that I have feelings for her. It didn't work out, but that's okay. I've been exercising and bought a bike to explore my area. Some things are still hard, but I have a more positive outlook on life. Story 48. I experienced intense suicidal thoughts and struggled with substance abuse, leading to a couple of attempts. One of my close friends took her life, and I realized that if I didn't seek help soon, I would follow her path. I ended up checking myself into the hospital a few days after her funeral. Story 49. Not me, but my mom at 50 smoked a lot. She had a massive heart attack and was told that if she didn't stop, she would die. She said the worst pain she ever experienced was getting stents placed in her arm and into her heart. She never smoked again after that. I was also a smoker, not as heavily as she was, but I have now stopped and am trying to lose weight too. Her wake-up call was also mine in a way. Story 50. When my boyfriend told me I needed to drop out of high school for my mental health while I was sobbing on my bedroom floor after getting home. Story 51. I realized that walking up the stairs made me breathless in my early 30s. Ever since, I have been motivated to take better care of my health and monitor my weight. Story 52. I quit drinking, using marijuana, and smoking tobacco cold turkey because otherwise my little brother would have cut me off. Story 53. I love art and always have. Creating has been my biggest passion ever since I could safely do it. However, my attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, depression, and self-doubts get the best of me when it actually comes to making art. My wake-up call was when I was diagnosed with 2 spinal tumors causing a mass effect on the spinal cord. I was told that one of them, the one in my cervical spine, might be inoperable as it was partly in my skull, which meant I would slowly become a quadriplegic. This crushed me as it meant I would lose my ability to draw, as well as many other bodily functions, but this stung the most. Thankfully, the neurosurgery team decided it was operable, but those were the longest 2 weeks of my life. I did not know whether I was going to lose all autonomy or have a chance at saving my body. Then, I faced the choice of risking surgery with a chance of paralysis or probable paralysis as my tumor continued to grow. I chose to remove it, and it was the best decision of my life. I regained function in my right arm, which was the most affected part and also my dominant hand, and I did not suffer major nerve damage elsewhere. I promised myself that if I made it out alive and able to use my body, I would spend a lot more time drawing instead of scrolling mindlessly, doubting myself, or engaging in negative thoughts. You hear these platitudes all the time, but after this experience, it was truly ingrained in my mind that I should never take what I have for granted. I almost lost the very thing that gave my life purpose, and I should appreciate what I have because not everyone is so lucky. Story 54. When I decided to break up with my ex because I wasn't happy, I realized I wasn't happy with myself as well. I am a work in progress. Story 55. I had been lashing out at a dear friend when she started a new interest that came with new friends. We are both artists, and I felt left behind, afraid she would lose interest in me, as though all that defined me was my art. I was mean, petty, and disparaging of her new interest. Eventually, she became quiet, not answering messages, not posting online, and not drawing. After a couple of months, she wrote me a heartbreaking message about feeling hurt and insulted, feeling too awful to engage in the things she loved, and asking me to do better. I respect and adore her. She is kind, patient, friendly, and wise. I was devastated and ashamed. I promised her I would do better and apologized sincerely. That was a few years ago, and it was a significant turning point for me. She had every right to step away and not speak to me again, but she gave me another chance, and I have been able to prove that I am better than I was. I never want to hurt anyone else or make hurtful remarks out of insecurity. Often, when we hurt others and become aware enough to change ourselves, those we hurt may not be there to witness our growth, and that is their right. However, it feels wonderful when they can see that we have changed and made amends. Story 56. Walking into a bar and feeling completely invisible is a strange experience. I was never popular or exceptionally attractive, but I used to receive some attention. After turning 38, I felt invisible to people of all ages, no matter where I went. When I attempted to flirt, I often received no response or faced immediate rejection, sometimes accompanied by unkind remarks. I decided to hire a personal trainer and commit to a diet, and now I feel more attractive than I have ever been in my life. Story 57. When I got sick frequently and spent days researching illnesses, I realized I should also consider my mental health. Story 58. I was a lonely teenager, barely having any friends, most of them online. I was slowly but surely turning into a raging involuntary celibate, blaming women for my loneliness and pretty much everything. An online female friend knew how terrible I was feeling and decided to visit me before I left the country for a study abroad program. Before leaving, she told me the hard truth. It was not surprising that no one wanted to date me because I was boring, having not left my room for 3 days. I didn't care to know how she was feeling. I was too self-centered in my loneliness to make any real effort to change my situation. It really hurt me, but I eventually realized she was right. I decided to care less about losing my virginity, stopped blaming women for all the evils of the world, and started recognizing when the blame lay with me. She really turned my life around. Story 59. Learning that perimenopause occurs in the early 40s and the severe impact it and menopause can have on muscles, skin, hair, mood, bone density, heart health, weight, and memory is significant. It feels like I have a few years before challenges arise, and I need to make lifestyle changes to hopefully soften the blow. A clean diet and regular exercise are essential. Additionally, witnessing my parents' health decline since their 30s and deteriorate further in their late 50s is quite motivating. While genetics play a role, lifestyle choices and untreated trauma are significant factors. Story 60. Complete mental breakdown that took me to the psychiatric emergency room in the hospital. From there, I started taking my mental health seriously. Story 61. My son was born, and I realized one of us needed to be sober and attentive, so I quit drinking and dedicated myself to him. Fast forward 2 years. I broke my back and lost my dad within a 6-month period. I was overweight and miserable with back pain, but he's 4, and I want to play with him like my dad did with me. I started losing weight and eating better, plus not drinking. I have lost 54 pounds in a year, and I'm not stopping until I know he can enjoy his childhood like I did and that I can enjoy him while he's little. Story 62. Physically, I was out of shape and a pack-a-day smoker. I had been a high school and college athlete, and when my friend beat me in a foot race, I was taken aback when he said, "You know you're out of shape, right?" Mentally, my therapist asked, "How much of your anxiety do you think is caused by scenarios you invented in your head that you treat as reality? From my perspective, you spend most of your time living in a fantasy world." Both of these things changed my entire perspective. Story 63. I was living with my parents and left for work a little earlier. My stepmother called to let me know she saw me leave from the dog camera and asked where I went. I was 25 years old. Story 64. Enough. You have been complaining about your girlfriend for 4 hours. Either dump her or don't, but please be quiet. I ended the relationship. I only regret not doing it sooner. Story 65. A woman fell in love with me and didn't give up on me for years when I needed it the most. She was very stubborn, patient, audaciously vocal, and had a wicked sense of humor hotter than a stellar reactor. She consistently nudged me and was always there. I fell in love with her personality and slowly emerged from that mental turmoil. Story 66. Reading through old journal entries, I realized I had been writing about the same unhappiness for years. That was the wake-up call I needed. I couldn't keep blaming time for what I wasn't changing. Story 67. I had serious mental health issues and nearly died from starvation. I was hospitalized at the last minute. It was strange because I felt suicidal and wanted to die. However, when the doctors told me I was actually dying, I felt scared. I remember lying in the hospital bed, terrified that I would not wake up again. It was horrible. I made it. I am still alive, and although my mental health is still poor, I have learned that only I can change it for the better. Story 68. My pants didn't fit anymore back in 2011. I was 218 pounds at the time. This morning, I weighed 169 pounds. Story 69. I was always overweight, but my wake-up call came when I was kicked off a roller coaster at Cedar Point because the harness couldn't latch properly due to my size. I have lost over 100 pounds since then and have maintained my weight loss for 10 years. Story 70. After my abusive ex wrapped her hands around my neck in public and then gaslit me about the experience, I realized something needed to change. That wasn't the first red flag with her, but it was the last. I started to do some digging and realized all my relationships had been neglectful in some way, and this was just the worst one. I began somatic therapy, specifically eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, after 4 years in talk therapy, which wasn't helping. I took a break from physical relationships to work on respecting my autonomy and my body. I reached out to all the friends from whom I had been isolated, working on my platonic relationships. I found community by putting myself out there and engaging with activities I enjoyed. I now have a partner I want to spend the rest of my life with, and I can distinguish between where I end and she begins. I love spending time with her, but I also balance it with alone time and time with friends. When there's conflict, I don't just capitulate to appease the person across from me like I used to. I'm less concerned with what everyone else thinks and more focused on being authentic and kind. Story 71. I shaved my beard and realized I have a double chin. I looked in the mirror and asked myself if this is the man I want to be. The obvious answer was no. I am focusing on my diet and exercise to get back into shape. The beard had hidden it well. Story 72. I became very ill from chronic overworking and terrible working conditions as a large animal veterinarian, and I eventually needed to go on disability. My doctor advised me to find a new job, or I would be at serious risk of health complications within a year or two. I was 32 years old at that time. Story 73. I was given a $100 bill to pay for food. I didn't realize I had received a $100 bill because I wasn't paying attention. The waitress gave me a lot more change than I was expecting. I was just a child, but I remember feeling a huge level of greed. I didn't want to tell the waitress she had given me the wrong change, and I didn't want to tell my mom either. It was for a split second, but it felt like 10 minutes of the ugliest greed I ever felt. Story 74. Stretch marks on my legs indicated that I needed to lose weight, which I did, only to develop even more stretch marks. Story 75. I was asked to leave a job because the owner thought I was too loud. I had to consider whether I wanted to quiet myself or find a place that appreciated my energy. Story 76. I hated looking at myself in the mirror, but it was not enough. I was out with some friends and we took a group picture. Seeing how my face looked in that picture made me start working on myself. It was hard to begin, but this was the one time I maintained my efforts. I was chubby, but I lost all excess weight that year and have maintained a slim body ever since. Now I actually like seeing myself in the mirror. That transformation was a significant boost to my confidence and overall quality of life. Story 77. My taste and desire for food grew as I began earning on my own. To eat as much as I want and whatever I want, I have to work out. I realized that once I built up a good amount of muscle, I needed to maintain a substantial and healthy diet. It became a win-win situation for me. Story 78. I typed a whole message and deleted it. Essentially, it reflects the development of recent years. My body gave me a significant sign that enough was enough, so I listened. I just wish I had listened earlier, but perhaps it was meant to happen this way. Story 79. My partner and I had been fighting, and he finally told me how much it affected him and how much he was suffering. I had been waiting for something to magically get better. I have an autoimmune disorder and mental health issues. The political situation is challenging, and I was struggling in graduate school. I was drinking and smoking heavily, not contributing around the house. If I wasn't on campus, I was on the couch. It was never going to get better unless I made it better right now on purpose. I had to try. I couldn't let him keep hurting or continue being a poor partner to him. He deserves the world. He deserves to be loved, cherished, and happy. He deserves a partner who steps up for him every day. I still drink on weekends and occasionally smoke when he does, but I'm present. I'm there. I'm not letting him bear the entire burden of household responsibilities or expecting him to take care of me because I won't take care of myself. Not anymore and hopefully never again. I love him. He's probably the only person who could have motivated me to change. I'm used to being a disappointment, but I love him deeply. Story 80. My wife of 27 years had enough and left me. I am still trying to understand what is going on in my head and what is preventing me from being the person she needs me to be. I just started therapy, but I don't think this session is going to work out because my therapist is focused on religion and spirituality, and I am not interested in that. Story 81. The moment I realized that unhealthy eating, an unhealthy lifestyle, and negativity towards those around me would not lead to any positive outcomes, I needed to start working hard to break this pattern and achieve mental happiness for my own well-being. Story 82. The last time I damaged a friendship by developing romantic feelings for her made me realize that I am still very much a people pleaser. This can lead me to violate other people's boundaries, and in turn, I can feel creepy when they inevitably violate mine, thinking nothing of it. Now, I am working to correct that so it does not happen again. Story 83. I woke up feeling down, but as a Slavic person, we tend to cope differently. Since then, I have started working out almost every day. I weighed 66 kilograms 3 years ago, and now I weigh 90 kilograms and feel happy. Story 84. I had significant mental health challenges while growing up, which led to a large ego. I often misinterpreted small jokes and feedback from others as personal threats. Once, when I was pursuing a job I really wanted, it required performance reviews and customer feedback. We were randomly evaluated, and I happened to fail about 3 out of 5 calls that month. It was the worst I had performed in a decade at my company. Coincidentally, it was also the time they were advertising the job I desired again. In my local shop, I sat on a bench, reflecting on my performance. I realized that I had never failed like this before, and my anxiety and overthinking were preventing me from achieving my goals. At that moment, I acknowledged that I needed to confront the one thing I had been avoiding. Afterward, I picked up one of my favorite books, Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway. That book transformed my life. 7 years later, I have the job I wanted, along with my own car and house. I also travel the world and recently proposed to my partner, never thinking I would meet anyone. My dreams came true by learning to work with the system and being kind to myself. Story 85. I realized that everyone I had finished college with was moving on to careers and families, while I was still a stoner working dead-end jobs and feeling stagnant. I had friends who were also stoners, and they seemed threatened by my desire for more in life. I recognized that I was outgrowing them, and they were holding me back. I stopped smoking marijuana and got my life in order. Eventually, I went back to school and obtained a degree in civil engineering. My clarity felt sharp, and I was finally content that I was moving forward. Story 86. Getting diagnosed with Hashimoto's is challenging. It is an autoimmune disease that typically worsens over time, even with medication. Since my diagnosis, I have been weightlifting 6 days a week and have cleaned up my diet. I take long walks and go hiking a few times a week. I feel stronger than ever, and my endurance is at the level it was before having a child and undergoing multiple surgeries. The medication I am on has helped tremendously, despite some side effects. I understand that I may not always be able to maintain this level of activity as my symptoms worsen, but I want to do what I can while I can to ensure my long-term health and well-being. The exercises I do are low impact, and I am extra cautious not to overdo it or injure myself, as joint inflammation is a major concern with Hashimoto's. Being more active, taking medication, and staying motivated has also greatly improved my mental health. I am not dieting or working out to lose weight. I am doing all of this to regain some control over my body and my future. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.